King Charles III. Chief Rabbi Sir Ephraim Mervis, 68%. The highest approval rating King Charles has ever recorded. And a visit to a quiet North London neighborhood that helps explain exactly why. In late July 2026, polling firm YouGov released its latest royal family favorability tracker, and one figure stood out above the rest. 68% of Britons said they believe King Charles was doing a good job as monarch, the highest score he's recorded since ascending the throne in 2022. It's a notable milestone for a king who spent much of his reign managing a very public cancer diagnosis, presiding over a slimmed-down monarchy, and navigating one of the most turbulent periods for the institution in decades, including the formal removal of his brother Andrew's titles. Royal commentators have pointed to several threads behind the number. There's the king's own openness about his health, the self-deprecating jokes about aging that have become something of a signature since his diagnosis, and his visible determination to keep working through treatment rather than retreat from public view. There's also a broader pattern experts have identified within the family. A slimmed-down monarchy that leans more heavily on fewer, more visible senior royals, Charles, Camilla, William, and Kate, creating a sense of stability and continuity even as the family works through real internal challenges. One royal expert recently described Kate specifically as the monarchy's greatest asset, noting that she and Charles have developed a deeper bond since both faced cancer diagnoses within months of each other in 2024, each drawing quiet strength and credibility from the other's openness. But numbers on a polling chart only tell part of the story. To understand what's actually driving that 68%, it helps to look at how Charles has spent his time, not in press releases, but in rooms most people never see. On April 29, 2026, a man armed with a knife carried out a series of attacks across London, first in Southwark and then in the Golders Green area of North London, a neighborhood home to one of Britain's largest Jewish communities. Two Jewish men, Norman Shine, 76, and Shloime, 34, were stabbed and seriously injured. A 45-year-old British national was later arrested and charged with attempted murder. The attack came amid a wider, deeply troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents across the UK that spring, including an arson attack on Hatzola ambulances in late March and a string of attempted synagogue firebombings and vandalism throughout April. 2 weeks later, on May 14th, King Charles traveled to Golders Green in person. The visit, hosted by Jewish Care at its Maurice and Vivienne Wall campus, brought him face-to-face with the two stabbing victims, as well as senior religious and civic leaders from across the Jewish community, including Chief Rabbi Sir Ephraim Mervis. Buckingham Palace said the visit was intended to reaffirm his steadfast support for the community amid rising security concerns. What happened inside that visit is what royal watchers have pointed to repeatedly in the months since as a defining moment of Charles's reign so far, not because of anything scripted or ceremonial, but because of how plainly human it was. According to those present, Charles spent several minutes individually with each of the two victims and their families, asking about their recovery with what those in the room described as genuine, unhurried attention. Afterward, Norman Shine told reporters that the king genuinely cared about how I was getting on and my recovery, adding, "He wouldn't let go of my hand. It was so special he came today." Outside the campus, crowds had gathered to catch a glimpse of the king, some calling out "Long live the king," and thanking him personally for making the trip. In conversation with members of the public, Charles was characteristically direct, rather than diplomatically vague. When someone described the attack as horrific, the king simply replied, "I know." At another point, reflecting more broadly on the state of the world, he remarked, "It's a dangerous world, isn't it?" A small, unscripted line that ended up quoted in nearly every report of the visit, precisely because it sounded less like a monarch's statement and more like something an ordinary person might say to a neighbor. Charles also met the first responders who had helped apprehend the attacker and treat the wounded, volunteers from Shomrim, the Jewish community's civilian security patrol, and from Hatzola, its volunteer ambulance service. He asked detailed, curious questions about their training, their equipment, and whether they were taught to disarm an attacker, the kind of practical, engaged curiosity that colleagues of his have long said characterizes how he approaches these visits, treating them less as ceremonial obligations and more as genuine opportunities to understand what people are going through. Before leaving, he stopped at a local Jewish deli, where he was presented with a freshly baked challah, a small, warm coda to what had been, for those in the room, an intensely emotional afternoon. The timing of the visit carried its own weight. It came just one day after Charles delivered a speech marking the state opening of Parliament, in which he outlined the government's plans to introduce tougher new legislation protecting the Jewish community from the rising tide of anti-Semitism. It also coincided notably with the publication of a letter from Prince Harry, who remains estranged from his father, condemning what he called the deeply troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents across the country, a rare moment of the estranged father and son publicly, if indirectly, aligned on the same message during the same news cycle. It would be easy to read the Golders Green visit as simply one more entry on a long list of royal engagements, the kind of solidarity visit monarchs have made for generations after moments of violence or tragedy. But royal commentators in the weeks and months since have consistently pointed back to this specific visit as a kind of template for how Charles has approached his reign more broadly, showing up, staying present, asking real questions, and resisting the instinct to keep emotional distance from difficult subjects. It's part of a wider pattern that's become increasingly visible in how Charles conducts himself in public since his own cancer diagnosis in February 2024. Those close to him have described a king who is, if anything, more willing to engage directly and personally with hard subjects than he was before his illness, whether that's joking frankly about his own mortality at a flower show, or holding the hand of a 76-year-old stabbing victim and refusing to let go until the conversation felt finished on its own terms, not on a schedule. That instinct, presence over performance, appears to be exactly what's translating into the numbers. 68% isn't a landslide, and royal favorability trackers have shown for years that public affection for the monarchy as an institution doesn't always move in a straight line. But for a king managing a genuinely difficult health journey, a family still working through real fractures, and a country navigating rising social tension, a record approval rating built on visits like Golders Green suggests something simple. People are responding less to the crown itself, and more to the man wearing it, choosing, again and again, to actually show up. There's a particular kind of trust that gets built not through grand statements but through small, repeated choices, staying an extra few minutes, asking one more question, refusing to let go of someone's hand before they're ready to let go themselves. In the spring of 2026, King Charles made that choice in a quiet corner of North London, in front of no cameras that mattered nearly as much as the people actually in the room. By that summer, 68% of the country had noticed. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more royal updates.